post by Crippling Things on Facebook said that the Game Boy Advance had been voted the best handheld console of all time. Now, you may think otherwise. I'm gonna be honest, the Game Boy Advance for me was a bit of a blur, but I'm kind of inclined to agree. I mean, look at this thing, right? This is probably one of the best handhelds of all time. It's natural. See that? It feels good. And while it doesn't have the backlight or the rechargeable battery that the SP has, I would take the ergonomics of this over the backlight and the rechargeable battery. I mean, now in the day and age of modding, there's no reason to get the SP. You could just get a drop-in IPS and a rechargeable battery, right? But back then, I understood why people did it. There's something about going from this, I don't know. The SP just, the triggers were really short. It was just like you're throwing up gang signs or something, or you have crab hands. I don't know. The top 3 of this list was Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, and PSP. Kind of inclined to agree with that top 3. If we're talking native functionality, I'm going with that top 3. The Game Boy Advance can play 3 generations of consoles: Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance. If we look at the Nintendo DS, it can play DS, which has an extremely slept-on library, and Game Boy Advance games. Because of its direct competition with PSP, a lot of times people don't really give the DS the credit it deserves, but it had a lot of bangers on there. PSP had a lot of bangers on there, I'm not gonna lie, but it only played 1 console generation. And while you had games like Crisis Core and Phantasy Star Portable 2, Metal Gear Acid, and also Peace Walker, it might be a little bit of bias for me, but I didn't play a whole lot of PSP. I played more DS. Dissidia though, Dissidia was fun. I realized over the course of this, I really am inclined to agree with them because I have 4 of these Game Boy Advances, and then I also have the GB operator, also have the Game Boy player on my GameCube. And while I may not have the fondest memories of Game Boy Advance, because that was largely a blur, I see the vision, and the list should appear here somewhere. Game Boy Advance SP should have been looped in with Game Boy Advance. I don't think you should have made a distinction between the 2 at all, because at that point, why Switch on here, not the Switch OLED or the Switch Lite? Kind of silly, right? The Game Boy Advance library was really good. I mean, you had multiple F-Zero games, you had Fire Emblem, you had at least 2 Metroids, you had a ton of Pokemon games, basically every Mario that existed up until that point, and then you also had the Donkey Kong Country trilogy as well. Those last couple aren't new games per se. It was still good to see them on there. When I had mine, I had F-Zero Maximum Velocity. I eventually got Pokemon Emerald later on. When my mom got it for us, she got us Game Boy Advances with Sonic Advance 1. I definitely have some time with it. I just don't really remember what all I had for it. I remember borrowing Mario Kart Super Circuit. I remember playing Metroid Fusion, but it's largely a blur. I'm not making this video or have all these Game Boy Advances for the sake of making up for the library that I've missed or the childhood that I've missed. That'll be the day that I show up with a Sega Saturn. I'm doing it because I genuinely like the Game Boy Advance. This is, to me, is just like the perfect handheld. And again, I'm going to reinforce what I said earlier. Natively, the perfect handheld. Where I disagree with other things, the DS would have been amazing if it could also play Game Boy Color and Game Boy natively. I think the 3DS had a unique opportunity where the 2DS lines probably could have had some backwards compatibility with Game Boy Advance, and that probably would have made it a little bit more appealing to me, at least. While the Switch has NSO and can technically play it, I don't think I'd put that over the Game Boy Advance. I know there's some people in there that see Steam Deck on this list and could have automatically jump off the window and say those Steam Decks should be on here, but the Steam Deck doesn't have any exclusives. It's just playing PC games, and it's a handheld PC. Sure, you can play all those other games from these other consoles on an emulator, but that's not native, is it? There's still going to be someone in the comment that said something about it. So if you watched this far and you see the comment, timestamp it, please. I challenged myself to play Game Boy Advance for 30 days last year. Well, just Game Boy in general. The Game Boy Advance might have it for me. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think the Game Boy Advance has it for me. I've been trying to think for weeks what games I had besides Sonic Advance and F-Zero, but I really can't think of anything. I was outside, I was playing PS2 and other stuff, so maybe that's why. I don't know where they got that data from, but I'm inclined to agree. Let me know what you think in the comments, and yeah, let's talk about it.